Sit, talk to me, damn it, or else I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy... Flyover State of Fear. Welcome back to Flyover State of Fear. I got a great guest for you this day with DeVaughn Taylor of Bloody Blunt Cinema Club. How's it going, DeVaughn?
I'm doing fantastic. Excited to chat one of my favorite movies. I mean, we've been doing this digitally for a hot minute, so this is going to be a good time.
Years of Twitter either being like agree or just sass. So this is perfect. And I'm so glad you're on talking American Psycho, which I'll reveal my hand early. A movie I didn't hold in the highest regards until this recent rewatch. I'm really excited to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is one of those ones that kind of grows on you. It is one of those ones that, I feel like people throw it around a lot, but it is one of those movies that gets more relevant as it goes,
sure.
Like or as time passes on, and like because there's so many small details to notice too. Like when you really like see some of the details behind the craft behind this movie, like not only just Bale's performance. I know that's the biggest highlight, but there's such amazing craft going on between the filmmaking and the editing specifically.
Can't wait to talk about it. But anyway, before we get to any of that, for any new listeners, I like to ask all my guests though, what is your horror origin story? Like, how'd you get into horror movies, or how didn't you get into horror movies? But since you host your own podcast, I am under the assumption that you like horror movies.
Yeah, I mean it's been an evolution. I've always been into horror movies ever since I was younger. Like I was one of the ones that started at a pretty young age. Started getting introduced to like Nightmare on Elm Street and movies like The Fly when I was like 7. Like I started off like
Fly. The Nightmare on Elm Street's right there. Like that kind of makes sense. In a way, that's like 7. The Fly. Oof.
Nightmare on Elm Street, I always say, is a really great introductory to horror. Like that's always my answer for like, oh, what's the horror movie you'd recommend to somebody that doesn't like horror movies? I would recommend Nightmare on Elm Street. But The Fly was, everybody always has a family member, that is, usually kind of their shepherd through the horror genre when you're that young. And mine was my uncle. I mean, my mom, she was also into horror movies, but like she's more into like she like watching like celebrity ghost stories on Bravo and like that kind of stuff. But she enjoyed a lot of scary movies, and she's the one that showed me Elm Street. But then my uncle, when he saw that I was into horror movies, he was like, "Okay, so you're into some weird stuff. Okay, like let's test the waters." So like he like gave me The Fly like out the gate to like see how I reacted to it, and like like which direction I would go in. And
it's just such the body horror thinking of like 7, because that's what sticks with you. Like you're not gonna or I should say not the most, because you're not gonna pick up any sort of like commentary or satire. You're just simple visuals.
Oh no, like I didn't realize it was a love story until like a few years ago when I was like, oh, this is a love story more than anything. But like, there was one of those Twitter prompts going around recently, and it was, what was the moment that you knew you loved horror? And I can think of the moment from The Fly, like every day I think about it is the arm wrestling scene. Whenever Seth is, he's going to the bar and he's trying to pick up on that chick, and he arm wrestles the dude and just snaps his forearm in half. And I remember just like, I wasn't expecting it, the visual of it, and like something so mundane, it's like I wouldn't arm wrestle people at recess because I was scared my arm was going to be snapped in half.
Give yourself a double feature of that and Over the Top, and you'd be like completely...
Oh, I love Over the Top too. Over the Top too. Two very sweaty. two very sweaty movies too.
So sweaty.
Both of them
were
equally
tweeting about
sweaty.
it at the top recently.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's a really good pick for kind of the start, what got you into it, right? The Fly. It's a unique one.
I mean, and like you said, like it was mainly for like at that time that was when horror was mainly about the visuals, about the scares and that kind of stuff. And then once I kind of started getting a little desensitized to it, it was once I kind of started looking at horror as more than that, like as it's more than any other genre besides action. Like it's an experience. Like I like watching a horror movie that you can like feel something during, and so it's like then it became kind of about the experience. And then once I kind of started writing and wanting to pursue a career in film, that's whenever I realized like, oh yeah, and horror is like the only other genre that has like no limits when it comes to like the storytelling you want to do. Like there's no rules. You're not confined to reality. You can literally tell whatever story you want. And that's why I find just there's so many layers to the genre.
And there's a way in horror too to even go no limits and still be like, if you want to make it grounded, you can do no limits and make it grounded.
Exactly.
Or not. So that's a great way to put it. Yeah, and it's interesting, like it's interesting what like movies develop wise over the years, right? So like you said, like The Fly, right? Like that's one desensitized to, but like there's, because of maybe the concept of it, could be re-scary again. I learned that for me, not The Fly, but your story reminds me a lot of my relationship with the movie Poltergeist. One where I was like, yo, that's a starter horror, like not too bad. And then the older I've gotten, I'm like, maybe like living on my own, or like, owning a couple apartments and things like that. Renting. I don't know why I said owning a couple apartments. I'm like, kind of scared of the Poltergeist, even though nothing really happens. And that's kind of reminds me of your Fly story a lot.
Yeah, like I definitely watch that, and I see the fear that like Steph has of like this fear of failure, like this fear of incompetence. Like I totally can relate to that. Like as someone, as an artist, not a scientist, but as an artist, we always have that, in the back of our minds, this like just like gut wrenching fear, just like what if I'm just not good, or I'm not gonna do something that I'm remembered by. So it's like his ambition. It makes a lot of sense to me, and like that's another reason it's from the time I was 7 till now, like it's still in my top 10 all time.
It's kind of the reverse of what we chose today in that. Like you're saying, the wanting to succeed in that, and the reverse where it's like Patrick Bateman is more of just pretending to succeed to fit his urge.
Oh yeah, like very much so. Like the two different versions of ego being displayed like between them is very, very different. One of them is very synthetic. Like like I'm gonna probably say that word a lot throughout this episode. Like something about Patrick Bateman in American Psycho, just like everything is synthetic. It's not real. Like his skin might as well be cellophane.
That's a great way to put it. I would love to get right into it though, because that's a perfect way to put him cellophane, and then we'll just get right into American Psycho. So I like to start off every episode with reading the synopsis from Google, which I have not read yet, and they're hit or miss. So, in New York City in 1987, a handsome young urban professional, Patrick Bateman, lives a second life as a gruesome serial killer by night. The cast is filled by Detective Willem Dafoe, the fiance Reese Witherspoon, the mistress Samantha Mathis, the co-worker Jared Leto, and the secretary Chloe Savini. That this is a biting and wry comedy examining the elements that make a man a monster. So that synopsis is wildly wrong.
They try to. I love how they try to set it up like it's a whodunit.
Yeah.
And this movie is totally not a whodunit, like, introducing like each species, the cop, the mistress, the wife. No, like, because none of those characters, I mean, not to say that they're not important, but they're not as important as that synopsis would like lead you to believe.
But even just like little things like calling Bateman a coworker, you know, or not Bateman, calling Jared Leto a coworker, fuck Jared Leto, hashtag fuck Jared Leto. But yeah, like it. So what I found just doing, that's why I like to read these Google descriptions, because they are so hit or miss.
Yeah, and it really still doesn't like give you anything. It kind of like says, like, describes it as like maybe like we're about to like kind of watch like a corporate slice of life movie, like, you know, with a mystery to it, and it's like, no, definitely not that, like, even the slightest. And like, I mean, I guess the most accurate part would be like the, you know, what makes a man a monster. And even more,
I don't know. I think he's a monster right when we get to the start. So I do want to, like I said, kind of in our intro, this was a full reintroduction for me, right? I'll give you guys a little my relationship with this movie is. I remember seeing it. Actually, I remember us recording the HBO VHS taping when it premiered on HBO. And at first, I think I only had, or maybe it was late at night, I think I had only seen that first like few minutes, and then I had to go to bed or something like that. Got caught like probably like 2001, and I thought it was about like a killer chef maybe for a few years, right, because of the intro. But then I eventually did see it, and I just remember not getting it, right, like, because you're a kid. I don't think this is a movie for kids, so you didn't get it, right. And I'm just being like, that was pretty like disturbing, because you really only remember like the prostitutes with the chainsaw and like the abuse, and that was kind of my memory of it. And then I watched it sometime in college and didn't click, and then we watched tonight or last night. I just want to, before we even begin, I did buy it. I completely like have a new respect for it, because I do get it, and I'm really excited to talk about it. So, what's your relationship with this movie?
Yeah, so I mean, it's one of my favorite movies ever, top 5 easily. I have an American Psycho tattoo on my arm, got my Patrick Bateman axe.
Oh, dope.
But I could even argue that my Texas Chainsaw could even be American Psycho as well, but that's Leatherface's
the
song.
Movies are intertwined,
and they are intertwined. Yeah, two of my favorites. And you know, it's one of those movies. I don't even remember the first time I saw this movie, honestly. Like, I don't really remember it. I just kind of have this memory that I've always have known. Like, I've always known about this movie. And it was, like you said, like, you know, watching it, like, I definitely watched it when I was too young and didn't understand any part of it. But I remember watching it because it was one of the first instances of me, like, really recognizing a powerful performance. Like, it was one of the first times I was like, okay, this guy is acting and he's doing something very special right now. Like, that's
what, and it sounds like you could, people can yell at me if you want. That's what finally stood out to me. I was like, oh shit. Because one thing I put it on like around like, let's say 10 o'clock last night. 9, and my wife was ready for bed or whatever around 9, and I was like, oh, she was like, you could throw it on. She don't like horror movies, so she's like, you throw it on. I'm not paying attention. I'm like, nah. I remember it being pretty, like, you know, disturbing. You're not even gonna want to have it on in the background. But after watching, I'm like, nah, you know, it could have been on the background. And it's such a powerful. But back to the thing of performance, the one thing. So I'm gonna pepper in some fun facts as we go along. I'm sure you read it. Is just the commitment of Christian Bale. I think my favorite fun fact that I had read is that he did his audition, you know, completely as Patrick Bateman in character. And when he met the director, the author, where the author was like, it was the only time I've really ever been creeped out in my life, because this was the character I wrote, and it was just sitting in front of me.
Yeah, there's so many interesting things about the casting of it. Like, one of my favorite fun facts is Christian Bale said he modeled the performance after he saw an interview of Tom Cruise on David Letterman. And he said that he's like, I just saw this like, you know, nothingness behind his eyes, that, and like, you know, but he has this, you know, big giant smile and like this, like, you know, peppy energy. And he said that, you know, that's what he modeled it after. And the studios really did not want Christian Bale. They really didn't want him. They were trying to recast him behind Mary Herron's back. And like
Johnny Depp,
yeah.
Brad Pitt, Ewan McGregor, Leo.
I mean, yeah, all the big names were thrown out, and really the only one that got close was because they were gonna replace Mary Harron with Scorsese at one point, and then that's when the Leo stuff came in, and so Leo was attached when Scorsese's name was kind of getting thrown around, but she, maintained that she, held on that she was going to do the movie. And then Christian Bale, like they never actually offered Leo the role, but Christian Bale wrote Leo a letter explaining the situation and basically being like, hey, so they really want you for this movie, but like, I really want this role. Like, I've been wanting this for years.
It's perfect.
And and then Leo was basically like, "Oh yeah, no, they haven't even like contacted me, but like, I won't even touch it. It's all good."
I'm doing the beach, which is something we can't even like get available today. It's it's the story of how it got made is more wild than some of the stories, especially for this movie too. It just the fact that Bale was just like not taking auditions or anything because he was so confident that he could get this role. I guess the Leo, it's like probably was like one child actor to another, right? It was probably like, hey man, just
pretty much like he basically was just like, hey, he was basically, and that was like the big thing behind it was the studio didn't think that Bale could sell the movie. Having him in the lead.
And his agents and everyone's like, it's career suicide. This is a disgusting movie. And it turns out it's the best thing that could have possibly happened.
And it's sad because they said the same thing for Mary Harron, and it sucks that he kind of went on to have his career, but it almost ended up being the case for her. Like, it's wild that like, she's done other movies, but like she never had like these big name, successes like this. And like, there were people calling her misogynistic, her a woman taking on this story. And it's wild.
I love that you brought that up because I love the note, and it's I guess more in the facts and like so that we peppered in as we go through it. But it was like she was confused by the criticisms of like not all the slaughter, but like the homophobia by Patrick Bateman. She was like, wait, what? Yeah, I included that. Why is that the big thing that's standing out, not the hacked up bodies and other corruption? And Mary Harron signed on to make it was far enough removed from that time period to make that a shine a light on all the corrupt shit and racism and homophobia and all those type of things in that movie, and kind of put a spotlight on them and not make it look cool like another not Wolf of Wall Street, another Wall Street.
Yeah, I made this comparison on another podcast, or it might have been on ours, but like, if Mary Harron wouldn't have been the one to like adapt that story, like I feel like this is why it makes sense that like her adapting it like and turning out the way it did is because like with her, like there's no thought in your mind when you're watching this that like you should be like like seeing yourself in Patrick or see that Patrick's a cool guy or like fantasize his behavior or his lifestyle in any way. And so it's like, it's not like what we got with like Wolf of Wall Street or like what we got with Fight Club. I feel like this movie is kind of in that camp a little bit as well, because like Fight Club is, a great movie, don't get me wrong, but it's like people take the wrong things from it, from Tyler Durden's character.
I was a 17-year-old boy at one point. I totally understand the movie today, and I think it's a great movie. But like, I definitely took the wrong message from it at the ages of like 16 and 17 when I was like, it's my favorite movie.
I literally have a Fight Club tattoo that I got while I was like 17. And I'm just like, I mean, luckily it's a tattoo that you wouldn't see it and think it's from Fight Club, but I know it was inspired by there's an arrow and it says "Just Let Go" above it.
Okay, that's
generic enough. It actually people just like make fun of it for being like a white girl tattoo more than being a Fight Club.
You don't have like I'm Jack smirking revenge on your forearm.
No, exactly. But it's from the scene like where they're driving the car and like Tyler Durden's making him like taking his hands off the wheel. But yeah, so it's like it could have been one of those situations where you have boys, idolizing Patrick Bateman, but like with her directing, she made it to where it's like there's no way of that happening. With Fight Club, it's like you see it and it's like, like he kind of does present Tyler as this cool character, but it's like here it's not that way.
I love that. It's a great point. I love that you brought it up because it's the same way of like the big critique Scorsese's gets brought up. He's my favorite filmmaker. But it's like, the romanticization, and then if the payoff doesn't, or if those payoffs don't hit for you, then you just think it's a romanticized movie, right?
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I like watching movies where it has you on the line of like, okay, how do I feel about this? But like, I like with this, it's like with this kind of story, it had to be like clear cut. That's like, no, Patrick Bateman, he is disgusting. He's racist. He's misogynist, and he's a fucking loser. That's my favorite part.
And he's a loser. What I loved that I picked up on watching it this time, I should say, and this goes right into that, and I think it starts in the first bit of the movie is his fakeness of like he's queued up to have like the right answer about every issue, whether it's like, hey, we the first scene, right? There's a anti-Semitic remarks, and any good person would be like, you were being really anti-Semitic, but he has a point to say it, and he doesn't believe. He has like
a rehearsed speech ready, for each conversation. Like, and every conversation like that throughout the movie, like when they're having their like kind of circle conversations with the boys, like they always sound like rehearsed. They don't sound like he is literally this is how he feels. He sounds like he's reading it, and like, and it's and. The only thing, like one critique that I do have about this movie, I wish they would switch the opening monologue and the lunch scene. I kind of wish we started with his monologue and then we could have jumped into this like lunch scene. So I kind of thought that's like one tiny nitpick I have with the movie.
Him getting together, him getting his routine together, and
because it's one of the best like introductory monologues like in a movie period. Like how many times has it been ripped off in pop culture, like the Margot Robbie commercial, like how many people have probably done this monologue in acting class. Like it's so good and delivered so perfectly and gives such a wonderful picture of Patrick Bateman in 2 minutes.
I love the note that Christian Bale woke up and did that routine every single day as that character.
Insanity.
Which, like, I do have to say, because TikTok's rotted my brain, and I'm on, like, movie TikTok, there's a steelbook out of this movie where it's the face peel.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I just bought this in a lot, not that one, just as, like, a Blu-ray lot, and I'm like, I really want that steelbook. I don't even love the movie to own it twice. But
it is a gorgeous steelbook. Yeah. I have it on DVD, so I'm going to buy the steelbook so I can have it on Blu-ray because it is gorgeous.
But having said that right there, we just kind of naturally got into it. The first scene, it starts off like food's being prepared, and it is a pretty intro credit, but I think you're right, that punch would work so much better without the food prepared. It's almost like...
I actually like that part.
Dexter mimicked that, right? With their food, with the breakfast being compared and the blood orange looking like blood, but this is like a cranberry tart or something. No, that's really
I actually like that part. Like I like the actual title card. I meant the like the lunch scene, like where they are having like the conversation about the anti-Semitic stuff. I wish those two scenes were swapped. I actually really love the intro scene, and like Dexter definitely ripped it off a little bit. Hannibal flavor as well. I know Hannibal is very food centric.
Gotta be those gorgeous shots.
Yeah, and great score too. The score by John Cale is, I think, one of the more underrated elements. John Cale is one of the founding members of the Velvet Underground.
Oh, cool.
I don't know if a lot of people knew that, but very, very. I love a simple, elegant score. Like as much as I like, really big, grandiose ones, or I love my synth scores. If you can have an interesting score with simply just piano and strings, then like you're doing something there, because like it's so good.
It's very subtle and to notice, and I think that it enhances the movie. It's not a movie that relies on its score or it tries to hide its
No.
mistakes, which is really important. But yeah, so like yeah, my first kind of notes after that, after that, the lunch monologue of the anti-Semitism really is like all white, no personality. Patrick Bateman is 27 years old, does a rigorous routine, like pretty like just
Also
there's nothing
funny.
there.
It's also funny watching him that he's presented as 27 and I'm 27 now, and I'm like, I don't feel like I'm like anywhere near the age of Patrick Bateman. I find that really funny. And note that.
Oh, sorry. I was just saying I just turned 30, so I do understand that. Like I'm like, no, you're not 30, 27. I'm not even 30.
Yeah, exactly. I do find it very funny. One of the notes I find that I had was, so it's like when we're like, another thing that really gets us into this world that Patrick is in is like the very first scene with him in his office with talking to Gene. And it's like you love the walking on sunshine with a straight face shot.
The needle drops.
This has, I mean, a lot of people talk about some of the best soundtracks in films. I feel like people don't mention American Psycho enough because it has all the best 80s hits, like literally all of them.
If they were able to get, I know they couldn't, I know she petitioned against it. If they were able to get that Whitney Houston song, you wrap that in, it would have been.
Oh, man.
If he was able to commit a murder to the greatest love of all while doing that speech, my opinion might have changed 10 years ago of this.
Oh, that would have been an all-timer. But anyways, he listens to music on his way in. But like, I love when they show Patrick in his office, and like you notice, Patrick never works this entire movie.
No one does.
No one does. He comes into his office, he reads, he draws stuff, he talks on the phone. And he goes out to lunch with people. There's a lot of eating, but there's literally no work done in this entire movie.
And they're all, then they're all vice presidents. So the next scene we get after that is them at another dinner showing their business cards, which is a scene they actually showed us this scene in one of my design classes in college. It was just to hammer home the importance about like type. Forget if it was a type class or a stationary class, but about, paper and typography and like that, which is really odd out of context. But,
yeah, I mean, I feel like the scene is one of the, I'd say is one of the more popular scenes like of the movie. Like it's another one that's kind of been mimicked in other things. And like, I just find it so funny. Like I noticed something that I never noticed before on this rewatch. There's a wind sound effect every time somebody takes out their card that makes it like more dramatic, and it's so fun. Like the editing of the scene, like between the shots of each person's face, comparing the cards. And fun fact about this scene, Christian Bale could make himself sweat on command.
I didn't watch
So they would do this scene, and he because when Lewis even points out, he's like, Patrick, you're really sweaty.
Yeah.
Like Christian Bale could make himself sweat on command. Like what?
Yeah, it's I never knew that. That's bananas.
Like I don't even know how you can go about doing that.
I'm trying to do it right now. No.
Like what? Think hot thoughts? Like I don't even know how to like get there. And
cold showers.
And like this right here is like kind of a point, like you mentioned it too, about like how he stayed in character and like kind of did the routines and stuff. See, it's like Christian Bale is a good example of method acting when you don't need to be an asshole. Like you don't need to like inhibit anyone. Like because he has it was in an interview, and it asked him about like method acting, and he basically explains why he does it, and like he doesn't have like like all, because he's not a trained actor for one. A lot of people like don't know, like he's never been like a classically trained actor, didn't do classes.
Thought he was one of these little kid proteges.
No, exactly. Like you kind of feel that way, but like, yeah, he has no formal training, and he like, says that he's like, I'm not like some of these other actors that can like turn it on and off. in between takes, in between scenes, he's like, I am not skilled in that way. He's like, so that's the reason that I, tend to still stay in character whenever I'm shooting.
Like his Dark Knight counterpart with Heath Ledger was able to turn it on and off, right? There's those famous stories of him talking like the football game in the elevator, and then doing his famous scene walking around the dinner party. And Christian Bale needs to be, in his dialect the whole time.
Which, everybody forgets about his Welsh-ass accent. Like, geez Louise.
Heavy. I remember him accepting his Oscar, and it's like, huh? What'd he say?
And I like that he put it that way too, because like a lot of people when they talk about method actors, they like kind of think it's because they have like this ego about them. But I like that his explanation is because of his insecurities, rather. Like it's not because he sees himself as like this, like top tier thespian, because so I like that.
And he doesn't see, except there's one incident which he found out was just a really intense set, and like the
Terminator.
And even then, since they've had their amends and whatnot, I like that I don't have to hear in this movie also the Jared Leto story. You don't hear the Jared Leto stories of Christian Bale. It's like, no, he does his job. He's just intense. Like, but I did, we're kind of right up to it. Like I said, I think I skipped some stuff, but nothing really, nothing too crazy. I would just say, like, we get a little peeks into it. We did meet before the business card scene. We did meet Reese Witherspoon, who's his fiance, which is also just an odd role to see her in now, because this is like something she would never attach her to. But I guess it's like not too far removed from Fear, which is the only other like horror movie I would put her in.
Yeah, she really hasn't done too much genre stuff, and it is really nice. I mean, the cast in general, like all the different faces you see, we got Justin Theroux, we got Josh Lucas, like, I mean, like...
Well, that's a question I meant to do research on, is how many Reese Witherspoon romantic leads do we have in this movie? I was trying to figure out if Jared Leto had been in one, because Josh
not with
Lucas
her, I don't think.
And if I don't think Willem Dafoe has been, but I'd like to watch that if he has.
No, but I mean, we do have a pretty solid number of them, and it's like, and I love how like when you look at like the other guys, and I mean that's kind of a point, like you said, like how many of them have been Reese Witherspoon romantic leads, but it's like how many of them are that typical dark-haired white guy lead in movies? So it's like a gathering of all of them.
And one thing I want to mention of that is they of that is the thing you got to be listening is his name changes all the time. He's always either getting mistaken or introduces himself as something else.
Yeah, nobody recognizes him except for Evelyn. Like he's always getting mistaken for somebody, and like again, like it's the fact that he just takes it. He doesn't correct people. He just...
Oh, sorry.
And Lewis is the only person he will correct because he believes he's the biggest doofus. So it's like he thinks Lewis is the only person like beer them. So that's why he's also like so mean to Lewis. And then plus, Lewis being gay also. But besides
volume.
But besides that, like, I mean, somebody even, his lawyer even says at the end, he goes, Patrick Bateman, that guy's spineless. And because he doesn't correct anybody, like mistaking him and like all these other things. And the fact that, I mean, I wish they did more with the guy with Marcus Halberstram that does look a lot like Christian Bale. I wish they did more with that of like, because like his character doesn't even really have many lines, like the guy that he's actually mistaken for. So I wish they did more with that.
It goes over your head a little bit too, on the one or two watches, right? That guy's interchangeable for Christian Bale.
He even has the same. He even goes to the same barber as me, but I have a slightly better haircut.
So we do meet all of them, and then like we do jump to another kind of dinner scene. Like it's all just dinner scenes leading every other way. They're always just getting reservations, but they're not getting the right reservations because they're also all, as you put. They're all losers who don't plan ahead and can't get any sort of reservation, right? This is high-end New York City. I mean, Evelyn Reese Witherspoon, she's talking about she's talking about hiring Annie Leibovitz, 1980s Annie Leibovitz, to like shoot their wedding photos. Which anyone who doesn't know who Annie Leibovitz is she's the person who's done like every cool like Vanity Fair like Rolling Stone cover you've ever seen in your life up until a certain point. So I was like, that was a nice little like, oh, like she's high class and he's just kind of fucking around.
Oh yeah, I mean, with some of like the other name drops, it's like apparently Rothschild is like is apparently like their rival company for like the company he works for, but then like also like he aspires to be like Trump, like like there's even like a name drop there.
There's a couple. So it's Trump, like two Trump name drops with his just, like, at that time, point of status, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing with all of these guys. Like, that's why it's like, who can get a reservation at like the highest place? But then like, it's also like, if you can get it last minute, that means you're even a notch above that. Like, the fact that when later on Patrick Bateman like calls to get a reservation at Dorsia like the night of, and he gets laughed at by the host on the phone. But then Paul Allen, Jared Leto, he's like, oh, I can guess a reservation. I can guess a table at Dorsia tonight, like right now, like, because he's just that much more above Patrick.
Like I keep saying, fuck Jared Leto, but I do like his Paul Allen character. He comes in and he seems like he does in a way. He's everything that Patrick Bateman wants to be because he just seems like he belongs. He's able to get the reservation and he's a Wall Street prick, but he belongs to be there.
Yeah, like he is exactly like what Patrick wants to be. Like everything that he does is comparing himself slightly to Paul Allen. Like, his apartment has a better view than mine. His suit is better than mine. His haircut,
his business card. Although I was a fan of Bryce's business card.
Me too. I was about to say Bryce's business card was actually my favorite of the bunch. I was like, yeah, Paul Allen's is cool, but like Bryce actually had like the best one.
Yeah, I literally have a note. I do like Bryce's. There's something just it's so clean. I would get that and I would go, oh, this person was nuanced. They knew what they were doing because as a graphic designer, you do judge cards you do get, but not in this way.
Yeah, there's a video on YouTube too. It's like a designer that like goes through like each single card and like the fonts and everything. Like it's a really fun one. But like yeah, everything is about comparison to these guys. And yeah, with Jared Leto's character, like he like he has like that same kind of energy that Patrick Bateman has, but he's a little more charming. He's more approachable than Patrick is, because like. When Patrick like tries to make jokes, referencing serial killers, none of his friends laugh, and he's like always kind of like, like none of his jokes ever hit throughout the movie, which makes me crack up. Like nobody laughs at his jokes.
I don't think once. And
no,
jumping way ahead, but even when he brings like, I don't know if there's a proper, like the call girls, the prostitutes to his house, not like before the abuse and all that, they look so disinterested, except when that woman's getting like is able to just get like a warm shower or a warm bath. Like the faces that they have look so disinterested, where it's the same thing. It's like no one cares or is interested in the guy at all. Even Evelyn, when they're in that cab ride, it's just, and it's funny to see it it's supposed to be 1987. Is he's listening to music while they're in a cab in New York City, like if we had an Uber share. An Uber.
Yeah. Oh, like, yeah, straight up. And like, like she, like, because I feel like she's the only reason that she is with him is because he apparently is, his dad is apparently like one of the owners of the company. That's like something that's like kind of glossed over a couple times of like this, the nepotism that like Christian Bale, like he even mentions how he's a child of divorce at one point too.
There's a lot of little, like layered reveals of like backstory without going into them, and I love that it was the director her doing that on purpose, being like, no, he's a monster. We don't need to see why he's broken, which is something a lot of movies today, good or bad, get lost into. So just there's a monster.
Yeah, I mean, and it's very much, all through action, like, because we see the thing that does break him is, when he goes out to lunch with Paul Allen, they go to a shitty, like, Texarkana, like, Mexican restaurant. And Marcus Allen's just talking all sorts of shit. He's talking himself up. It's funny. They're talking at each other, but neither one of them is actually like talking to the other
No,
person,
there's
if
no
that makes sense.
conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like they are just talking out loud to one another, but they're not even like on the same conversation half the time.
it's like a business meeting, or like if this podcast, each one of us were just trying to get out facts and not having any sort of conversation.
Which is like one of my pet peeves. Like I hate when I meet someone that they just like talk about themselves the whole time, and it's like, and then you go to mention something, and then still ends up back to them. And it's
Yeah.
like, so it's like being in a group with 5 of those kind of people would be the most exhausting thing in the world. Also, as a service industry veteran, I would kill all of them.
I feel bad for you, not because you're in the service industry and yeah, you're a veteran, and this like the way every one of them treats any sort of service person is abysmal. Whether it's the
whether
dry
it's
cleaner,
or the bartender. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that dry cleaning scene I love so much too. Like it's another. I love that the like first kill, quote unquote, that we see of Patrick is like we don't see it. Like like I love how they
Yeah.
have the shot of him walking with the lady, and like you're like, what's he gonna do? How's it gonna go down? And then just instantly cuts to the bloody sheets in this like moment to where it's like we see what he's doing, but then we see how he does interact with service people, like you said. So it's like kind of like 2 birds with 1 stone, the way they did that scene.
and the idiocy of him bringing it to a dry cleaner, because I'm sure the sheets are expensive.
Yeah, and like he's like, yeah, and you see the way he's like talking, because these are foreign people, like they obviously don't speak the best English, and he's like like belittling them, the way he's like talking to them and stuff. And it's just like, again, like the way he sees himself, like, and it's like he's so mean to like anyone else that isn't his coworkers, because his coworkers, that's when he feels threatened.
That's
and
what
like he's and he loses, and like I said, he's like spineless when it comes to them, but like anyone else, he's like is so direct and has no second thought about talking to people the way he does, except when it's with his friends.
Refresh my memory here. The woman who catches him or sees him in the dry cleaner.
That's just like an old friend.
It's like a friend, right? And she says Patrick. Yeah. That's where okay. Yeah, you're right though. They he has this like this extreme way of reacting to anyone who isn't of any sort of power, who can't help him socially or make him feel accepted. Everyone else is like, fuck you, you piece of shit. And then it's like, oh yeah, sure. Like, what do you need? Well, let's do that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like obviously the name of the movie in the book, American Psycho, and like there's always been the debate between like psycho and sociopath, like where does he truly fall? And it's like psychos, and he makes it a point to say that like he doesn't feel emotions that humans do, except for greed and disgust, which are still emotions, and also his need to impress people all the time does show that he cares about people's opinions to a degree. So, so it's like, I think he even like wants to convince himself that he's a psychopath to like make himself feel better, to be like, oh, well, I just don't feel anything, when it's like, no, you feel these like very deep insecurities about yourself, so it's like, he would rather be a psycho than be someone of lesser status, and which is wild.
He gets enjoyment out of, he doodles about it, but then he's the most sloppiest psycho of all time.
Oh, I mean, he's very sloppy after it's funny because like when he kills Paul Allen, he's very methodical about it.
Right, I think about to get to that, right? Like he's right there, and this point in the movie where like he sets up a dinner date with Paul Allen to go out and talk business or whatever, and like you said, they go to this like this restaurant that is like less than, there's no one in there. They make an Ivanka Trump joke, like it's a joke because it's not her clearly. And they go back to the house, and it's so like, it's dexterized, plastic everywhere. It's our famous Huey Lewis in the news. It's probably like the funnest moment of the movie with kills.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. Like, I mean,
yes.
who doesn't love Huey Lewis in the news? I love his whole speech. Like, and again, like he, when we hear him do these like monologues about music, like that is also something he cares about. He cares deeply about music. So it's like he does have these like, emotions. It's just like, he doesn't really know what to do with them. And it's funny though, but like when he kills Alan, because like, again, like when they're at the lunch, you just see it in his eyes. Like every time Paul Allen like says something that's like kind of a dig at him, it just like keeps building more. And then like right whenever he was like, you know what, why are we here? We should have went to Dorsia. That's like when he literally just like kind of like you see it in his eyes, and he's like, that's when he's gonna kill him. And like, takes him back, and it's fantastic. Everybody, one of the fun facts, Christian Bale improv the little dance shimmy he does when he's getting the axe. Like,
and I love that the director loved it. The improv moonwalk.
Yeah.
Like the shimmy moonwalk, he improv that. And then I do love, because the author of the book seems actually like a real prick whenever he talks like about it, that he's like, I didn't like that improv. And I was like, you're not a filmmaker.
That guy's he is a prick. He has a podcast, and he thinks very highly of himself. And I think the main reason is he's salty, because like I feel like this is like one of the few instances that a lot of people would agree that the movie is better than the book.
Yeah, that the book was such a hit, and then it became the movie is the go-to first.
The book was popular, when it came out, and it was also very divisive. But, one of the big differences is the characterization of Patrick Bateman between, because like in the book, he is a loser, but like, it's like a little more sincere. There's something different when you have the movie and you have this visualization of, Christian Bale in peak physical condition, looks like a perfect Ken doll. He's got the hair, his face, everything's perfect. So it's like when you see that person being a gigantic loser, it has a whole different feel behind it.
It's funny. I don't know any sociopaths, but I do know guys like living closer to around these New York City area, and these like finance guy people. I do know some people like finance bros that are this-esque or aspire to be all this, where it's just all surface, like great shape, everything, but there's no fucking personality. And it's like the last thing I ever want to do is go out to hang out with any of these people, go out to dinner with any of these people, because they're so boring.
And like his only personality is like when he's like, and he's going on these monologues about music and stuff, which all of them are fantastic, but he's also like regurgitating like quotes that he read from different reviews and stuff. So they're still not even his opinions of what he is saying.
I've mentioned it already. Like, I agree with his monologue about Whitney Houston.
Oh, he's not wrong in any of the monologues. That's the thing. All of his music takes were pretty spot on. All of them.
But you're right.
But he's literally just quoting other reviews and just like stitching them together.
What I'm doing with our conversation right now with fun facts. I'm just, they're not my fun facts.
Yeah, you didn't like research and like find these things. Like, we're take it, but it's just very funny that like each time that he does like that, like there's a total lack of personality. And but I like that when we do see these like when the kills happen are the times that because like throughout the movie he stays like pretty calm demeanor the whole time, and like there's points where he almost looks like he's about to freak out, but then he like keeps it together. But then the kills is like when he just like goes feral and he
lets go and goes feral. That's a great way to put it, because when he's hacking up Jared Leto, and you don't see his face and like the blood really hit. It's once again, you don't see him hacking him up. The joy and like actual like humanity of him comes out a little bit.
And
one
like
thing
when he like yells at him too, like he like hacks him. He's like, "Get a reservation at Dorsia now, you motherfucker!" Because like he's like that's what like set him off, and it's just so ridiculous.
The one thing I did want to re-mention is because I skipped over purposely is his first really kill we see, which I think is like the most heartbreaking one, is of the homeless man.
Fucking poor Al.
Is Al, and it sounds weird because it's Reggie Cathy, who very recognizable face. I think he was in House of Cards, I want to say. I have it right here, but they have an Al, and in all the credits it's just homeless man. His name's Al.
They very much went out of their way to give him a name, but like it's very heartbreaking because like again like this is like the first time too like where we do see him like really just like belittling someone, and like like the things he's saying to him like first kind of gives him hope they can help him. They just like nah, actually I don't want to help you, we don't have anything in common, and it's and
they're toying with him like
and so obviously like. Yeah, and for the movie, it very much mainly focuses kind of on his like violence against women, because it's a little bit more memorable. Those scenes are like kind of more drawn out, But we do see these glimpses of homophobia, like when he has his moment with Lewis, and then we also he has these layers of racism also, which is like which is interesting because like you said. Yeah, like, and at the beginning, because he like goes on that whole anti-Semitic thing to like show. So he's like one of those people that doesn't think that he's racist, but like with that kill, and then there's a line later that I'd never heard before when he's talking to Willem Dafoe, and he asks him if he like listened to the latest Huey Lewis, and he's lying, and he goes, Huey Lewis is too black sounding for me. And I never noticed that line before.
Fuck, you're right. I didn't pick up on it. Like you didn't hear that. Wow.
So it's like the racism and the homophobia is still there. Well, it's just not as present as like what he's doing against the women, but it's like it's still there, and it feels even colder in that way.
It's cold, yeah, because I think he's a perfect compared to another movie. He's the perfect encapsulation of the way they were presented like that, whether with the racism or of the characters of Get Out.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
Like the liberals that are all surface level, but at the end of the day, they're putting their brains into black people.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Like, I mean, I call it passive racism.
Yeah.
Like, so he's a passive racist. He's still racist nonetheless.
That's on full display of this movie, which it's a great point. And next time I watch it, I got to pay attention to that line with Willem Dafoe. And that brings us perfectly to the next part of the movie so we see the kill, gets rid of it. He does see Lewis as he's getting out of the house with the dead body, with Paul Allen's dead body, which makes for a funny, like pretty funny scene. Like I think the humor is one thing that I think takes more rewatches to get to me. For me, at least, it was just more of more watching to get the humor than just your first watch. Like I get it; it's a black comedy.
Oh yeah, and like it's very interesting because like I've seen people make the argument with that this movie, like this is one of those movies that people like claim is like almost too funny to where I've seen people that are like, oh no, that's not. I mean, it is a horror movie, but it's more of a horror comedy, and it's like, no, it's
a satire. It's a satire with. And satire doesn't always mean it's ha 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 funny. It's just a commentary on things, and there's quirkiness to the performances and the camera work. The one thing I notice is the camera angles and everything make us so uncomfortable, and we're usually shooting Patrick from the back or like as close as to inside his head as we can get, and they're so odd to look at. And I think the way it's shot plays into why people also think it's a comedy.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit, like, I do find this movie very funny. Like, I consistently laugh throughout this movie, and it's very quotable for a reason. But the thing with the humor is, it's like because of the satire and like because it is very blatantly, attack on, the yuppie culture of these, straight white men that like kind of have all this power. Like it's very blatantly that. So it's like all the humor is like very mean. It's all very mean spirited. It's like we are not laughing with the movie at any point. You are laughing at everyone. I feel like in most comedies, the goal is to be laughing with the movie. But this one, it's like we are laughing at it.
And the way the movie presents it, no one's a good person except for Chloe Savini.
Yeah.
The way the movie presents it. Because, I would say that, God, the first prostitute we pick up, like, she's not a bad person. Christy, yeah. Like, there's nothing she's doing. Or even the other one. Sabrina.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the character they make a point, she's the only one, like, you're not laughing at, and that's a good point because it's an ugly depiction of humor.
Exactly. Yes.
It is funny. Earlier, you did mention about how his jokes never land about serial killer stuff, and I feel like serial killer like knowledge is so ingrained in our culture today with like podcasts and people's interests, where they'd be like a riot. People are like, oh yeah, Ted Bundy, haha, he did.
Oh yeah. People. Oh yeah, he would kill now, but like he has like the Ed Gein one about like a girl putting his head on a stick, and like he like cracks up at it, and everybody just like stares at him so blankly.
But they're like also being like misogynistic and just awful pieces of shit at the same time. Yeah, it's a different way of his joke.
But they're the guys that are like, okay, it was funny when we did it, but you're too far. Like and it. So, and like whenever Christy and Sabrina are over, and he's just like, talking, like you said, like they have nothing, like they have no reaction to this very passionate, music filled monologue he just made. No reaction to it whatsoever. They're just like, okay, like, but this is nice.
Yeah, no reaction. They just gloss right over.
Yeah, and I love this scene too, like because it's so long and methodical and drawn out, and it does more to again like show the ugliness of Patrick, like how disturbing of a person he is. Like this, it very much like his desire for control. Like he's doing this monologue, this music monologue, but like in between is when he's giving them instructions on what to do as well.
Yeah.
Like, so he's going through this whole thing, but then in between, it's like, okay, yeah. I mean, I quote that I don't know how many times a week. Don't just stare at it, eat it. I say it all the time. Eat it. Don't just stare at it, eat it.
There's that's with that scene in particular. There's talking about that humor and like the oddities of him doing the monologue and pointing. It's all like there's like I that was one of the scenes I did laugh through, like of him like flexing in the mirror and all of that, and like the goofiness of Patrick Bateman in that scene. But then the tones shift as soon as like they're done and the girls are uncomfortable, and he's like, no, there's more, and then you see her like a little bloody, and like that completely shifts the tone. You're like, oh fuck, he's beating them.
And then again, like the way that it is edited, that like we have this whole drawn out thing of building the tension, like what's going to happen, how is this going to go down? And, you're building the whole thing. And it's like they spend a lot of time, again, like showing how ridiculous and goofy he is, how big of a loser he is. His vanity is controlled. They linger on the sex part of it. But then they again, like if this was a male director, they probably wouldn't have made this cut, to where it's just them leaving and you see the results afterwards. Because it's like, that's enough. Like we already get it, and we didn't need it.
I didn't, in that scene at that time, I didn't need to see him beat her.
Exactly.
You saw it. We see worse later. One thing I do want to mention at this point in the movie is he has already spoken to Willem Dafoe, who's playing the detective, and it's cool. Willem Detective plays his performance. He's in the movie like 3 times, 3 different scenes, and he plays it 3 different ways. As he's suspicious of him, he's believing him, and then just one as kind of vagity of,
he was like unsure, and and then they just like kind of, and then they would cut it in together in the scene too. It's not like they like did it like one scene this way, one scene. Within the scene, they would have them do each one all 3 ways, and then she would cut it even within the scene. So it's like even when they're talking,
it's really well done because it makes you confused because their first interaction. So Patrick did make went back to Pauline's house to like make it seem like he went to London and leaves the. This is why I said earlier, like he's never prepared. Like he doesn't show up with any gloves on or anything, and he leaves a voicemail that he went to London. And then the next day, Willem Dafoe gets here, and like Patrick Bateman couldn't be more like suspicious about it.
Oh
and,
yeah,
like, freaked
it's
out.
funny. It's funny. He was like like whenever after he kills Pauline, he's like narrating it, and he's narrating it with all this confidence of like, okay, so I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna take his body this way. I'm gonna do this suitcase over here, and he's like narrating it, and like that he's pulling off this perfect murder. But then, like you said, like when it comes down to it, and he gets questioned, he is so flustered.
Well,
Again, the automatic sweating.
The parallels of this movie to, and I know Christian Bale credited to this, and one of my favorites is Vampire's Kiss.
Oh, they're like the same movie, essentially.
The same thing. It's just one's super unhinged and one's not, but it's the same blending of lines, what happened, what didn't, even fuck with the cop investigation and even it too.
Yeah. I mean, I figured we'd probably get into it a little bit later, but this is like kind of where it starts, that thread of like, okay, is he doing it? Is he not doing it? And once it gets to the point, it's so tough. Like, because every time I watch it, I have a different reading. Like, and and Mary Herron, like, very distinctly was like, she doesn't have a proper answer for it. She's like, yeah.
I was kind of saving it for a bit there, but yeah, no, it doesn't know where it blends. Like I have like my opinions of like, oh, I think once we get that Paul Allen kill, or once Willem Dafoe shows up, that's when the lines really blend and his brain kind of goes different ways than it's shown. Because the one thing I failed to mention so far is before any killings, there's just scenes of him saying horrendous shit to people, but clearly that's his like inner monologue just being verbalized on screen.
Mm-hmm.
No one reacts. So, but he does. Sorry, we already had sex with we talked about it. He brings the call girls back,
mm-hmm.
and it's. I mean, what a scene! What a drawn out scene. But then next, I think we just get the jump right. They go to the nightclub with Justin Theroux, and I would say like it's not the most like important scene of the movie at all. Just them at another nightclub.
Yeah, just doing more drugs, more yelling people. Him even saying like, oh, well, if it's sweetener, but like, even if we still do enough of it, we'll still get high. Like, he's such a loser.
Hey, I'm trying to get do drugs over here.
I love it. It's I love how, like you said, like every scene in between him, like not, like doing some crazy shit. It's always either they're at somewhere getting food or they're at a club. Like always, they do it so much.
I feel like pretty accurate to like even today, like, which again I don't live there, but I've been enough like New York City lifestyle. That's all they're doing is going to restaurants or like out at a nightclub. No one's ever inviting you over their apartment.
Yeah, no, that's so true. It's like, and it makes it, you kind of, it gives you that stir crazy feeling when you're watching it, because then you're like, you feel the cycle at this point, or it's like, okay, now we're at the club again. After this, he's gonna have dinner with his mistress, and then it's like, okay, boom, now we go into that. It's like you can start predicting his life at this point of how just like boring and monotonous it is.
Oh, it's so predictable. And the mistress is interesting, right? Basically, it's was that Lewis's Lewis, who's in love with him, his fiance,
yeah,
and Reese Witherspoon is like hooking up with one of his other best friends,
with Justin Theroux.
Justin Theroux, and he does not care. But even the mistress is very like an interesting character, because she's just like, wow, you notice something about like you, like he's never noticed anything about her. He's just there for sex. And like,
I mean, she very much is like a toy for him. Like the fact that he is like still taking her out to dinner when she is just like so zonked out of her mind, and it's just like, I'm still going to take you to dinner. We're still hanging out because we still have to keep up this affair, because that's what cool business guys do. We have affairs, so it's like, but like she's. But she is also one of the, her and Evelyn, have a few different moments where they are some of the only ones that will like call him out on certain
They
things on like
notice.
humanity because they are on his level and they can. It's like Jean, when she tries to call him out on stuff, he can snap back and everything, like all that stuff. But like since Evelyn and Rosalind are on his level, they can call him out and it actually like affects him.
I do want to ask you a question about her. I know it's a little later in the movie. Is she's like, if I don't see you before Easter, like have a good life. Basically, is what she says, right? Does she commit suicide?
I
That
mean,
was the implication.
I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what she was alluding to.
Okay.
Yeah, it's very passing, and I wonder if that might have been like a subplot that might have been like left on the cutting room floor. I feel like they had to have maybe shot more to like kind of really distinct that, but like I still get it that like she's like suicidal. Yeah,
that was kind of I was waiting and wanted to ask you when we record it. Okay, so kind of in between and after that though, he does then have his he hasn't in this part of the movie he has not killed the prostitutes yet though.
no.
He invites Chloe Savini, his assistant, to be another affair, to invite her to dinner and be another kill. And he, takes the nail gun out, which in theory would be really hard to kill someone with because you need that pressure. But that's just how nail guns work. Anyone listening, I'm not trying to kill people with nail guns. But he's talking to her and she's giving a very human story of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I want to go do this and travel. And he basically says, you should leave before I let something really dumb happen. And it's after Evelyn calls and she's very like, oh shit, I didn't realize you were still with your fiance.
Yeah, I mean that whole scene is very interesting because you wonder, did he not kill her because like him actually like caring a little bit, or like if he didn't get that voicemail, would he have still went through with it?
Voicemail.
But I feel like it's that. I also feel like it's like at that point, like he also like kind of goes, oh well, your life is shitty as it is. I don't need to kill you. Is like kind of like almost the attitude I get from it, and which like kind of just like stoops him like just even lower. You see his face like whenever the voicemail is being left, and but even still like you would still think like even after that voicemail, like if he really wanted to, he still would have just done it. But there's something about it that like he feels sad for her, but it's not empathy. He feels just like actually like, oh, you're sad. Like, because he even says that later on when he's on the phone with her. He's like, why are you always sounding so sad?
I didn't even think of it that way. Yeah, I mean, she lucked out in that one, right?
Yeah, she did.
I think if Evelyn didn't call, she would have been dead.
I think so. I love there's so many like really great lines in that scene too. Like oh, what's that? And he's like, duct tape for taping things. And then whenever she asks, like she's asking him, like, setting it up to be like, oh, are you still with Evelyn? Like she's like trying to figure out. And he just goes, maybe. I don't know. Not really. And I love that so much. Yeah, I send that gift to people whenever they're like asking me something.
You probably sent it to me on Twitter at some point.
Yeah, Twitter, text message. Like if it's a question, I'm like,
maybe. I don't know. That's a good. I'm gonna put that in my back pocket as gifts.
It's a good one.
But then after that scene, though, we do jump right back to. I'm sorry, he does have lunch with Willem Dafoe, and Willem Dafoe, basically like is now playing though. Like, yeah, I believe you. Like, I believe you. There's nothing I could place you. And he said, oh, you were with Marcus Allen. And he was like, oh, yeah. Christian Bale was like, oh, yeah, shit, I was. And then they were like, great, let's eat dinner. Like, Paul Allen's in London. People spotted him. And then, like, Christian Bale feels relieved. And he goes then back out to go kill the prostitutes that he picked up earlier. I should say the one, Christy, and he invites the friend over.
Well, yeah. So he invites the friend over, and even before that, too, that's when he breaks up with Evelyn right before
Hmm.
he calls Christy and the friend as well. Because I think because like yeah like
I thought he broke up with
because
Evelyn
even
after.
no because it's pretty much right after this. That's when we kind of go on to the
Mhm.
or no, it is.
No, it's
It
before.
is after that. Yeah, when he breaks up with her, because then he like kills her straight from that, and then like pretty much after he kills Christy, like from then on, that's when we get like that really like long
Yeah, that's
uh
the.
sequence. And I love yeah he brings a friend over, just like whoever,
She
and
thinks he's another
Christy's
person though, which is funny because she's like, we've known each other for so long at the Derby, and like she doesn't even know he's Patrick Bateman.
Yeah, and it's like, and at that point too, like that's whenever I even start going, I'm like, is Patrick Bateman even a real person? But there
Yeah.
are other people that recognize him and refer to him as Patrick. If they would have kept the name thing going the whole movie, then I literally would have been like, is he even Patrick Bateman? But like, I feel like there's still enough people that refer to him as Patrick that like I'm not as far on that camp, but it's still enough
Sure.
to be confusing though.
There's enough to have like confusing and some good like theories behind there. You could put a whiteboard out. I think you should, and like really map out where to go with this, like Criminal
Yeah,
Minds.
yeah, and the kill with Chrissy's fun. Him just running around in his underwear
Yeah.
with tennis shoes on is so fun.
So yes, he's running around. So Christie's really not for it. She's like, I don't know, I could sue you. But he picks her up the limo and he's like, my driver's here, no worries. Picks them up, brings her back, meets the girl, drugs them both, and that's when you see a little glimpse inside the cannibalistic because I guess he's like biting her,
Yeah.
stabbing the woman in the bed, and then this does every movie has to have it. Every one of these horror movies have to have it. The murder maze. They're just or the body maze, which I like call them, like just bodies popping out,
Oh.
and like Christy's running
Mhm.
around. She's like screaming as she's running away, and she almost does get away. I mean, Patrick Bateman does bite her ankle, but she kicks him right in the face, and because he earlier was working out to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and was expired. And as a horror fan, I was like, "There's nothing weird about that. It's just background noise."
Not at all.
But I get the importance of the the movie why. But he follows around with that chainsaw around this spiraled staircase, which they're at Paul Allen's house because now Paul Allen's
Hmm.
been cleared, and he drops it, falls right on her, and the only thing I want to mention, because there's a really great transition where it goes right into his sketch at dinner, and that's when he breaks up with
Oh yes, you
her.
are correct. Yeah.
And but I did the graffiti. This is where it was very reminiscent to me of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It wasn't even the chainsaw, it was the way it was shot, and the words "die yuppie scum" are right on the walls of just like the self-loathing of what you are. Full display.
I know, and it's like, and this is where, especially on this most recent rewatch, 'cause I said I go back and forth. This is
Mhm.
where I start going like, at this point, this is from this point on is definitely fake. And what I think because like again, like one, the way that like the layout of his apartment, like it like felt just like so much bigger than it would actually be, and like did it make
There's
sense? Like
bodies everywhere.
did it make sense geographically? The bodies everywhere, so it's like that's where it like really kind of starts feeling like a fantasy to me. And like and we see the scene later of like after he gets off the phone with Janine, he finds or she finds his like book where he's been sketching all the things. You see all the drawings of all the things that we've seen
Hmm.
throughout the thing. So like that transition, like you said, of like him dropping a chainsaw. And again, like if that was a real thing, how would that kill her? That's
No, it
impossible.
it
So
needs your hand to go. Um,
because the hand, the blade, everything, but then like, but it transitioning into the drawing, that's where I really start being like, is it all really fake? And it is just like he's drawing in his book, but we're seeing what he's drawing. And that's where I really start to be like, okay, I don't think it was
yeah,
real, even though I'll say I wish it was real. I feel like the movie would
I
impact harder if it was real, but I don't think
yeah,
it is.
and that is the director's one. Like she's like, I wish I made a more distinct line of what was real, just because she was like, we talked about not liking these movies where it was all a dream, and that's where I'm like the
Mm.
homeless guy killing is definitely real, and I think that first woman with the dry cleaners is legit. And then I don't think Paul Allen. I think also Paul Allen was a fantasy because there's just too many.
I think that's where it stops. Yeah.
Because what happens, and this is where it's full blown. Like the director even said, and she's the only one to like tip her hand of anyone in the process of making this. Still 20 years later, is she's like, well, when the ATM starts saying like sacrifice the cat, you use your imagination. And then because at that point, this is right, he breaks up with Reese, and she's devastatingly crying about it, but we're crying because of her status, not because she loves Patrick Bateman. And he says like the meanest thing you could say to anyone. I feel like he goes like, I'm not interested in you.
You are not terribly important to me.
Yes, that. Ooh,
just so coldly. And then she's like crying, and she's like, well, what do you want me to do? And he's like, what do you want me to do? I want you to stop making this scene right now. And he's like, I'm leaving. And then she's like, where? And he goes, I'm just leaving.
And he leaves.
I have to return some videotapes.
Yeah, he says it a few times too. I wish we got a video store scene. And he leaves and he goes, and we see the ATM we just mentioned, and then he shoots an old lady, and then kind of just shoots everyone in his path.
Yeah, it's like that's where it's definitely a fantasy, because it's like he has unlimited ammo. Like he's just shooting everything. He even shoots the cop car and explodes, and he looks down at the gun like, wait a second, how did that make that happen?
We haven't even seen any hint of a gun of Patrick Bateman so far.
Yeah, he has never carried a gun once. He literally just pulls it out of nowhere.
And he goes the gun out, and this is when it really not rivals because they're two different movies, but takes on Vampire's Kiss, right? Like, like down to the crying in a phone booth, talking to, in Vampire's Kiss, his therapist, but talking to his lawyer. Or leaving the voicemail, and I think also at the same time, no, it's the next morning he calls his assistant, and so that's after all that thing, he it's the next day, and he goes to Paul Allen's apartment, and
everything's clean,
painted white. There's a woman in there, assumingly a realtor, that's just like, get the fuck out of here, never come back. He's like looking through the closet. And she's like, what? There was no listing in Time magazine or in the Times. And the one thing the theory I read about that, which I thought was like too much of a stretch, where people are like, it was real, but the property value is so high, the landlord cleaned it all up.
No, and I've always been into that theory too.
Really?
Like the only reason I'm into that theory, and like I said, like why I think it would be slightly more impactful if everything was real, is because like the idea that like he is so so privileged and so high up in his status that like he can do all these things and he's never gonna suffer any consequences for it, and that in itself would make him upset. Like that's why he is going crazy, because he wants it to be real, but then it's like, no, it's not real. And again, it's like he almost would have wanted it to happen. So it's like, I feel like if it did happen and then he suffers no consequences for it, like that makes, it keeps him on this cycle now of like, he's just never going to feel anything. He's never going to, like feel like he's important or like any of those things. So it's like, I feel like, and again, like the idea that he's just like so high up that like there's people, around that are just willing to look the other way, or they're willing to clean up his mess because of who he is. So it's like, I feel like that idea is very scary. That's just like, oh, it's just a white guy that's going to continue to do this to get away with it because he's a rich white guy. And that idea is scary to me.
Yeah, that is scary.
But I do think it's like, I think Paul Allen is like the first fantasy kill, and then everything after that is all fantasy after that.
And I think you're right on with the fantasy, because I also do think what tips off some of the fantasy is because this movie's so meticulous, right? Like it's all very crafted and planned. Is the lack of gloves and the hubris of like, I could leave a voicemail with my voice and no one will be like, that's not Paul Allen.
Well, exactly. 'Cause like I said, like that's why I felt like he was like narrating it and being so meticulous about it, because like he's getting off on like, ooh, I just killed Paul Allen and now I'm going to do this elaborate cover up. I have everything under control, and it's like that excites him.
Yeah. And so after all of that, he goes to like one of their country clubs, not country club, like another restaurant, or like where his lawyer happens to be there, and he's on the verge of breakdown. He's ready to confess to all of his friends and everything else, and he tells the lawyer, who doesn't even recognize him. He thinks he's Marcus, and he's like, "What? I
Mhm.
talk to you 3 times a day. I don't do that." He's like, "I thought that was a joke," and the guy's like, and
Oh, I
the
would have believed it if it was Bryce or if it
yeah.
was other guy, but not Patrick Bateman.
Yeah,
Like
he's
that
spineless. You
guy.
said earlier, he's spineless. And Patrick Bateman, actually, the lawyer reveals, no, I had dinner with Paul Allen in London twice.
Yeah.
And Patrick Bateman, then goes back to eat, is like demoralized, but then goes back, and it's the ending. There's actually a very poignant conversation though about like the inside of a person, reflecting about Reagan, and like this little political commentary there about it, which is uh
Mhm.
I think really fitting for 1987. And
And they even said something. They're like, "Oh yeah, he disguised himself as this
yeah,
old bag of bones, but underneath that skin flesh, he's actually a monster." Like all
yeah,
this stuff.
and that's a really good, like, I think, parallel of Patrick Bateman of that time, right? Reaganism and um that. But he goes back there, sits down, listens to this conversation, and we get another kind of ending monologue of him talking, and things are okay at the moment for him because he got away, but he's clearly mentally unstable.
Exactly. He's like, I don't know for how long. And again, like that conversation with his lawyer would like even hit like because like, that like also like kind of got me like on like that theory of like that the lawyer is like he's in on it of like no, I fucking like shut up, stop talking about it, I got you covered, like everything's good.
Yeah, that could be there.
Like it kind of felt like that, but the fact of like how much he didn't recognize Bateman kind of gets me off of that because then it's like, oh, if he doesn't recognize Bateman, he's not going to go through that effort. But I
Oh,
don't know. I could still see it though. I think
I told
that
you.
the idea, yeah,
We're gonna get together. We're gonna part two of this. We're just gonna get a whiteboard, and we're gonna
yeah.
start drawing where things connect.
Like, okay, if he's here, this person calls him this.
Yeah,
Like track how many people actually like call him Patrick and interact with him, and like
yeah. It's
things
really
that couldn't be faked.
it's really just Lewis who, I think I glossed over a little bit, who once, um, he thinks he's coming on to him, and Patrick Bateman, like, very, like, sweatily runs away, embarrassed, where he also takes his time to strangle him with gloves. I know it sounds crazy. The gloves are really important to me, that when they're
No,
on and they're off.
he
And
even washes his
yeah,
gloves
like,
in
it,
that
it, it
scene,
off.
which cracks me up.
And um that doesn't happen. And he's like, we mentioned there's 3 people that know who Patrick Bateman really is, right? And you don't see Lewis again. I don't think he's at the table at that ending scene.
No,
Um,
no, I don't think so.
but he also, like, Patrick Bateman over told him to, like, really, like, fuck off. Like, he was like, call me, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
So, it, I wish we had a definitive answer to say, like, things that happen really blend it, but I do think every time Patrick Bateman gets embarrassed, or the sweatiness, like you said before, and we just covered, is the real Patrick Bateman, and that did happen.
Hmm.
And then the slick, cool things don't happen as they should.
Yes, and and I think I've only read like certain passages of the book. I haven't read it in its entirety, but if I'm not mistaken, I think in the book it is more explicit that it
Oh
is
yeah.
all fake,
Oh,
and
is it?
like that it like because like you said, like this is his idea of himself being cool and
Yeah.
doing these things.
It's
I'm glad that but I'm also glad that there's not a definitive line. I love movies
well,
like this where you can just like like I said, like I can watch this tomorrow and I might be on the other side.
well,
Like who knows?
I'm sure, like, we could talk for another hour and come up with another answer of it not being real or real, right? It's one of those movies you think
Yeah.
about
Exactly.
It is interesting. I've only heard of it. I've never watched it. We all know about it. It's the American Psycho 2 with young Mila Kunis. And that they do answer the question, I do know, being like, all of his murders happened and she was inspired by him.
Yes.
Never saw it. And I watch a lot of shitty movies, like sequels, things like that. And it seems like something I should watch just for...
Yeah. I haven't watched it myself. I've watched like a YouTube like of somebody like doing like a watch through of it. And like, because the thing with that one is like that movie was its own screenplay for like something completely different, and then they tacked it on to like make it connected to American Psycho. So I assume throwing that line in, they didn't really think about like, oh no, like we're gonna spoil this like mystery, because like I mean, American Psycho, and it did come out actually fairly like not too long after it came out. So it's like people hadn't had time to like, I guess, formulate all the theories on whether he did or not. So like they just kind of threw it in and just go, yep, he did it. He was a crazy psycho.
And this movie's fan base really has grown, right?
Yes, exactly.
It was a modest hit when it was released. It was a 34 million gross, but it was a modest hit, and it's just grown ever now. Earlier in this episode, we were talking about there's an awesome steelbook collector's edition you could get, and it's going to keep coming out with things like that because it has its fan base. DeVaughn, is there anything like, I feel like we covered this movie pretty efficiently? Is there anything you want to mention or we failed to cover?
No, I mean, like you said, like this is one of those movies that like it kind of has like, even though it does feel so distinctly in 1987, the movie itself has like a timelessness to it that like, where we can, study these themes, years upon years. And like you said, like, I love that, people, it's one of those movies that, they got past like, okay, yes, it is funny. You get past Christian Bale's performance, and there is just like so much underneath it, from a filmmaking standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint. I feel like it's just a very well-rounded ass movie. Like it's from entertainment, having something to say, the filmmaking craft itself. It's just so well-rounded, and like I'm glad that it has more of an appreciation now than it did like even 10 years ago.
Right.
I feel like the perception is wildly different on it, and like now it's pretty much agreed upon. Like this movie fucks.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. This movie fucks. If I use Paul quotes, that's where we would put on the. And you've definitely this rewatching this episode, you've changed my opinions of this movie, for sure. And just in the sense of I get it and I appreciate it, and it's not where I was like, not for me. It was in the camp of I get why people like it, but not for me. And I do think I have a lot more appreciation if I'm I know the mood I want to be in when I want to watch it, put it that way.
No.
So that's awesome. So DeVaughn, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at _DaddyDisco. I host a horror movie podcast, the Blade Blunt Cinema Club, where each month we either dive into a subgenre or a franchise and kind of go through it and see what makes those movies work in that subgenre the best. So right now we are covering aliens and creatures from outer space, but when this is released, I think we'll be heading into Pride Month, maybe.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys covered Life. That was the one we were talking the pre-show. I did listen to that episode today, and coincidentally I just bought it and watched it, so it was perfect timing.
Oh man, I fucking love that movie. It's underrated. If you want to hear me throwing some shade at xenomorphs, listen to the episode on Life. You can find Bloody Blunt Cinema Club on all the platforms every Tuesday, and on Twitter at Bloody Blunts Pod.
Perfect. Yes. And then you could find us here at Flyover State of Film and Flyover State of Fear, what you're listening to on all podcast networks and YouTube if you're watching. All right. Stay frightful, everyone. Welcome to Flyover State of Fear.